Imagine it's 1647. You wake up, not in your bed, but in a courtroom. Your neighbors are staring at you. Some look terrified, others furious. And a judge is asking you questions you can't answer. Because as far as you know, you were asleep the whole time. This actually happened. In the 17th century, sleepwalking wasn't just weird, it was dangerous. If you walked in your sleep, you could be accused of witchcraft. You could be declared possessed by a demon. Or, if you got lucky, a doctor might tell you that you simply had hot air trapped inside your body. And that was the good option. Today, we're going back to a time when wandering around at night with your eyes open and your brain asleep could cost you everything. Your reputation, your freedom, maybe even your life. To understand why sleepwalking was so dangerous, you have to understand how people in the 1600s saw the world. There was no neuroscience, no sleep studies, no understanding of REM cycles or parasomnias. The words somnambulism existed. It comes from the Latin somnus for slumber and ambulare for walking. But what it actually meant was still up for debate. And that debate was terrifying because everything unknown was suspect around that time. In the 1600s, the line between the natural and the supernatural was paper thin. If your body moved without your conscious will, something else had to be controlling it. The question was, what was it? Depending on who you asked, the answer fell into one of three camps, and all three could destroy your life. Let's start with the most lethal accusation: witchcraft. In 1486, a book was published in Germany called the Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches. It became the witch hunter's handbook for the next 2 centuries, and it had something specific to say about sleepwalking. The Malleus claimed that demons gave witches power to fly through the night to attend Black Sabbath rituals, and then it drew a direct line. The same demonic force that lifted witches into the air was what made sleepwalkers rise from their beds and wander in the dark. So if you were caught sleepwalking, especially near someone else's property, the logic went like this. Your body was moving under demonic power, that meant you made a pact, and if you made a pact, you were a witch. Now, let me put this into perspective. Between 1400 and 1775, approximately 100,000 people were prosecuted for witchcraft in Europe and British America. The peak was between 1560 and 1630, right when sleepwalking was being debated in medical and theological circles, with an estimated 50,000 executions. And here's something modern researchers have uncovered. Historian Elizabeth Hunter, in a 2020 paper published in the journal Renaissance Studies, found substantial evidence in English trial records linking witchcraft accusations to experiences that sounded exactly like what we'd now call sleep paralysis and sleepwalking. Think about that. A person gets up in the night, walks around, does something they can't remember, and their neighbor testifies that they must be a witch. It wasn't theoretical, it shows up in the actual court records. Accusation number 2, demonic possession. Now, if they didn't call you a witch, the next accusation was just as bad. Demonic possession. In the 17th century imagination, the sleepwalker, or noctambulus, as they were called, was something deeply uncanny. Hunter's research describes it vividly. The noctambuli were seen as eerie figures whose abilities and behavior mimicked those of disembodied spirits or the possessed. You're walking, your eyes are open but glassy, you might be talking, saying things you'd never say awake. You're performing tasks, even complex ones, with no memory of it later. To a 17th century observer, that did not look like a medical condition. It looked like something else was inside you, using your body. And the stories people told about sleepwalkers fed this fear. A clergyman named Nathaniel Wanley published a wildly popular book in 1673 called The Wonders of the Little World, basically a collection of bizarre but true tales that 17th century readers couldn't get enough of. The sleepwalking chapter included a man who could write poetry in his sleep, a man who was dreaming he was riding a horse, would get up in the night, put on his spurs, straddle the windowsill, and smite the walls. A student who climbed to the top of a castle turret and robbed a magpie's nest, all while fast asleep. These stories were meant to be marvels, but here's the thing. If people believe sleepwalkers had almost superhuman abilities, it wasn't a huge leap to think that those abilities came from somewhere not so human at all. A 2020 academic paper puts it bluntly. In 17th century English medical literature, the sleepwalker was depicted as an eerie figure that possessed almost superhuman abilities. And we can see this fear playing out in the most famous piece of 17th century literature, Shakespeare's Macbeth, written in 1606. Lady Macbeth's sleepwalking scene is one of the most chilling in all of theater. She walks through the castle at night, rubbing her hands together, trying to wash invisible blood off of them. Out, damn spot! Unconsciously confessing to murder while her gentlewoman and a doctor watch in horror. Shakespeare audience understood exactly what they were seeing. A soul so corrupted by evil that the body betrays it during sleep. Somnambulism as evidence of damnation. Alright, so far we've got witches and demons, but there was actually a third explanation. And in theory, this one was supposed to be the rational scientific alternative. Before we had neurology, we had humoral theory. This was the dominant medical framework for nearly 2,000 years, from ancient Greece all the way through the 1600s. The idea was that the human body contained 4 fluids, or humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Each had qualities: hot, cold, dry, and moist. An illness happened when your humors got out of balance. Under this theory, sleepwalking was caused by hot vapors rising from the stomach or other organs into the brain. These vapors agitated the animal spirits, the supposed messengers between brain and body, causing them to move the limbs while the higher faculties of reason stayed asleep. So that was the medical explanation. Sounds almost reasonable, right? Better than being burned as a witch. Well, here's the problem. The treatments. If a doctor diagnosed you with hot vapors disturbing your brain, the solution was to balance your humors. That meant bloodletting, cutting into a vein and draining blood, or purging, forcing you to vomit or emptying your bowels with powerful laxatives. In extreme cases, they might even perform trepanation, drilling a hole into your skull to release the trapped vapors directly. So let's recap your options in the 1600s. Accusation 1, you're a witch. Execution. Accusation 2, you're possessed. Exorcism, imprisonment, or worse. Accusation 3, you have hot air in your body, and we're going to drill a hole in your head to fix it. That was the good option. But here's where it gets really interesting. Not everyone in the 1600s believed sleepwalking was supernatural. Thomas Willis was one of the most important physicians of the 17th century. He's remembered today as the founder of neurology. The Circle of Willis in your brain is named after him. And in his medical practice, Willis encountered sleepwalkers. He believed sleepwalking was an entirely natural disease, a medical condition, not a spiritual crisis. But even Willis couldn't deny how disturbing it looked. Witnessing a human sleepwalking was, to him, similar to a ghost or a specter. Even the rational physician couldn't find a better word for it. And Willis wasn't the only one trying to draw a line between medicine and the supernatural. In one remarkable case from around the same period, a large English country house was believed, by everyone in it, to be haunted. Nobody would sleep in one particular room. Finally, a guest agreed to stay there overnight, and he discovered that the ghost was the family's own daughter who walked in her sleep. The haunting was just a girl with an undiagnosed sleep disorder. But for all the progress the rationalists were making, the courts were still grappling with an even harder question. If someone commits a crime while sleepwalking, are they responsible? The first surviving documented case of sleep murder in England came in 1686. Colonel Shaney Culpeper, a habitual sleepwalker, shot and killed an officer of the guard and his horse while asleep. The legal question went back centuries. As early as 1312, the church canon C. Furiosus had stated that if a madman, a child, or a sleeper mutilates or kills a man, he incurs no penalty for this. Culpeper was pardoned by King James II. So even in the 1600s, the height of witch trials, the peak of supernatural fear, the law recognized that a sleeping person isn't the same as a waking one. That distinction probably saved Culpeper's life. What we still don't know. So here's where we land. In the 1600s, if you were caught sleepwalking, 3 accusations might be leveled against you. You were a witch, under the demonic power described in the Malleus Maleficarum. You were possessed, a noctambulist, an eerie, almost supernatural figure, or you had hot vapors trapped in your body, and a doctor was coming at you with a knife or a drill. And none of those reflect how we think about sleepwalking today. We know it's a parasomnia. We study it with EEGs and sleep labs. But I want to leave you with this. In 2020, historian Elizabeth Hunter, the same researcher who dug through all those 17th century records, concluded her paper with an observation that stuck with me. The fear people had of sleepwalkers wasn't just superstition. It was rooted in something real. Sleepwalking blurs the boundary between being awake and being asleep, between being yourself and being someone or something else. And any culture, in any era, finds that blur profoundly disturbing. Now, we don't burn people for sleepwalking anymore, but the unease, that's still there. We just call it science now, instead of witchcraft. So, what would you have done? If you were the neighbor of a sleepwalker in 1650, would you have called the magistrate, the priest, the doctor? Or would you have been the one person in the village who said, maybe they're just asleep?